Hi, I'm Alex Jordan from Learn Color Grading and FilmSimplify.com. And Blackmagic Design not just actually a couple of days ago, but I'm always late, but it doesn't matter. Blackmagic Design released the final public version of Resolve 16.1. So today we're going to be not discussing the features or the new features of 16.1. We're only going to be discussing one thing, which is the new sync bin, which is something that was added to the cut page in Resolve. Now, I think this is the single most important feature that was added to Resolve 16.1, and it's very, very impressive. However, it's very easy to misunderstand what it does. So we have a new thing called sync bin. First of all, what is the sync bin? The sync bin is simply a different way of approaching an old task, or a new way of approaching a very old task, which is multicam editing. Now, multicam is, in a very simple, if you don't know, just filming the same action from multiple cameras at the same time, so like 3 or 4 cameras, and then later just cutting between these different cameras. Very popular with music videos, with live events, with many things. So the question is, we already have a multicam, a very powerful multicam workflow in the Edit tab in Resolve. So why do we have a sync bin now that basically seems to perform the same task? Well, Resolve or Blackmagic Design actually rethought the whole process of multicam, because multicam was, the workflow is established a long time ago, and it seems to me like they just rethought the whole thing. How can we reinvent the multicam process workflow to make it much easier and faster and more accessible to more people? And the answer was a sync bin, which is just, think of it as modern multicam. I'm not sure if that would be the right way to describe it, but they just call it modern multicam. So before we look at it, we just need to understand why why Blackmagic Design decided to rethink the multicam workflow. What was broken with the original multicam? Well, the original multicam workflow, if you ever worked with multicam before, a lot of people hate it, not in Resolve, they hate multicam in general, because the workflow is a bit cumbersome, because you have your timeline. And the way most or all basically NLEs approach it is to create a special type of a timeline, so a special kind of timeline, and this timeline is the multicam timeline. And we'll just add everything there, and you have to open the bin. So the timeline itself is a multicam timeline that you work with, which is different than your main timeline. So now you have your main timeline, and then you have your multicam timeline. And whenever you cut things into the multicam timeline, they live in this compartmentalized version of your timeline. So they're all in the multicam timeline, and your main timeline just sees it all as one, one file. So what Blackmagic Design tried to do here is to just sync all the files inside a certain bin. A bin is simply a folder. So inside this folder, you have files, and the folder itself handles the syncing between these files. And then it's just a folder. There is no multicam timeline. You work with the new way, with the sync bin. You just work from your main normal timeline. So you don't need to have 2 different timelines where you keep on switching between, and it gets complicated. You just have one timeline. And all the files inside this particular bin in your project, just a normal bin, are synced. And this provides you with very interesting powers, let's say. So you work with a certain file, you have the file in your timeline, and there's a certain action happening, like someone is moving this object from here to there. And you want to, while the person is moving the object, you just want to cut to the other camera. In the old workflow, you had to go to the multicam timeline and just go to that point and switch the camera at that particular point and get back to your main timeline to add the extra stuff. it wasn't the easiest thing to do. However, now, while the person is actually switching, you can literally go to the sync bin and tell it, listen, bring me the same action from another angle, from another camera for this particular action. Just find it, go Resolve, go find this particular action from another camera and just add the new file on top of the existing file. So Resolve will just go find the same action from another camera and just bring it, put it on top of the file you have. And the magic here is that Resolve finds the same exact action in like a 2-hour film from a different angle, adds it exactly in the right place in your normal standard timeline without you needing to switch timelines at all or work with any other, just to jump from your timeline, jump through hoops to change this thing. It just brings a normal clip. Imagine if you have someone who's helping you, like an assistant, and tell them, you know what, just find this action from a different camera and put it here. That's what it does. It just puts that right away. That's the first thing. The second most important thing is, let's say you edited your timeline. So you have your timeline, So you have your timeline here, and you're going through the files in the sync bin. So you're going through the other files, the files that were not added to the timeline. And you found a very interesting shot. Like there is a very nice shot of someone dancing, someone performing something, or the same thing is moving here. You just find an interesting shot and you want to add this shot to the timeline, to your normal timeline. However, you need to now match it. So normally, the way you would do it is that you would take this shot, have an in and out point, and then go scour your timeline looking for the same action. Where did it happen exactly? And then place the new footage on top of the original footage in the right place after, spending like 10 minutes trying to find it. However, with the new sync bin, because everything is synced, Resolve knows exactly where everything falls on the timeline. So you find the footage you want to add. It's a very nice footage, add in, out, and with a click of a button, Resolve will insert the footage. You might have a 2-hour timeline. Resolve will find the exact spot where you want to add the new footage, and it will just insert the file exactly at that particular point without you doing anything. I know this is one of the longest introductions I gave to a video, but it's very important to really understand why do we have a new workflow, because the original workflow was a bit stuck. This workflow was invented at a certain point, I guess in the 90s or the late 80s, and we stuck with the same way of thinking of multicam since that time. And for the first time that I know, someone is trying to find a different approach for the whole thing that is actually much easier and faster. So I know you're bored at this point. Let's jump to Resolve and see how this happens. So this is Resolve. This is the cut tab, and here we have just our normal files. These files are filming the same exact action. So this is a certain action from different angles. So this is angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, and these files have audio attached to them. Resolve will use this audio to sync these files. The first thing I need to do to create a sync bin is to create a bin. So I'll simply right click here, select add bin, and call this bin sync. So I just have a new folder here. I'll drag the files I have and drag them on top of this folder, and now everything is inside this folder. So currently, note that I have this icon in the top left that's called sync bin. If I click it, this is the sync bin, but currently nothing is being synced. Nothing is synced at the moment. So how do we sync the files? It's pretty simple. In the media pool, while I'm in a folder that contains files from different angles, that contains audio, I have this icon here. If I click it, this is the sync window. This window will simply sync the files together without you working, because you don't need to go manually and sync the files. Resolve will sync everything with a click of a button. Now, I know that the first option here is timecode. However, most of us will not have access to cameras with timecodes. So the solution is to use audio to sync. So I'll simply tell Resolve to sync using audio by clicking this icon here. So now I just activated audio sync, and I'll hit sync. Now, all the files are synced, and if I go through the files, you can see that the same action is happening in the same time in different films. So if I move here, note that the same action is files, so the files are synced. And now I just have to click Save Sync. Note what happened here. With the old workflow of multicam, what usually used to happen is that you create a timeline, and you add the files to the to the multicam timeline and sync them over there. And now the timeline in the old method is handling the syncing. So the files can go out of sync at any point if you just move one of the files by mistake. However, here these files are synced because they are in a folder, and there is no timeline yet. It's just that these files now understand each other, and they know exactly where every point fall on all the files. Let's think of it that way. And it just makes your life much easier. We'll see how. So I'll simply create a timeline by dragging the fun of the files here. And this is the first file. And we can simply play to see the action here of the file. So this is the action, just arranging some books. Great. So now I'll click here to open the sync bin. And this is a different view of the same bin. So this is the bin, and I have file 1, file 2, file 3. Now notice something very important. Whenever I click on a file here, so this is file 1, I load it into the monitor. And if I click file 2, now it's loaded to the monitor, file 3 is loaded to the monitor. And this is a special mode for the monitor. This special mode only appears when you are in the sync bin. So for example, let's just say that I just opened the first file here and I'm scouring through it, and I like this point for some reason. You see when she pushes the first book to the front here. So I like this moment. What will happen here, I'll simply click I to add an in point, and I'll move to this here and add an out point. So what happened here is I added an in and an out point, which means that I told Resolve that I like this part of the clip. Let's add it to the timeline. However, where to add it to the timeline? Now, if I'm doing things manually, I'm going to have to scour the timeline looking for where did this action happen on the timeline. However, here, after setting in and out points, I can simply click this icon, okay, that very conveniently says source overwrite. It's called source overwrite to make things very confusing. Okay, that's a goal, obviously. So you're overriding the source, which is very confusing. However, all I need to do is to click this button, and notice what happened. Resolve know exactly where did this action happen. Let's go back, click here to open the monitor, and take a look at the action. Now, when she moves the book forward, note that this is exactly where Resolve inserted the file. So when I selected the part that I like and told Resolve to add it, because I'm in the sync bin, Resolve knew exactly where to add it, so it's synced with the rest of the actions, with the rest of the clips in the entire timeline. Just think about that. Now, I didn't have to go look for where this part falls in the timeline, and to insert every clip. That can take a very long time. So for example, let's go back to the sync bin, open this one, and maybe come to this point here. Let's just move to the point where she adds these book stands. So I'll just come to this point, add an in point, move here, add an out point. Let's just work on the in point more to make it more clear. And now, without me trying to find where does this fall in the timeline, one click of a button, and note that Resolve inserted the new clip here at this particular point. If I go back here to open the timeline and I play, note that it was added to the right time. Look here, look before, and now we just added here. So it found this exact point in the timeline without needing to create an entire multicam timeline. This is just a normal timeline. I can just work normally with the timeline, add whatever I want, but whenever I need to sync both clips or add the same action from different angles, I can just click a button and it will just be added there automatically. Wow, anyway, so let's see the other part of the whole thing. Let's say that I came to this point here, for example, and this is the original file, so I have only one file on the timeline. And now I need to tell Resolve to go find the same angle from another camera. That's pretty simple. What I'll do here, I'll go to the sync bin, and now I want to add the angle from this camera. So I'll simply select this camera, loading it here to this monitor. And Resolve already created an in and out point for me for 5 seconds. Because Resolve knows that I want to add a part from this clip, but it doesn't know how long does the part have to be. So it just creates a 5 second in and out portion that you can extend later. So what I'll do now is, after clicking this camera, so telling Resolve to find this action here in this camera, Resolve already found the action, created in and out point, and now I need to click this icon, the icon that is next to the icon we used a while ago. It's called Place on Top, much easier. And just by clicking here, note that Resolve inserted the new clip at the right exact point. So the sync bin, because we synced these files, has 2 different modes of operation. Mode number 1 is you telling Resolve, listen, I like this section, I want to add it to the timeline, take it and please just go add it exactly where it should be on the timeline. The other mode is that, hey, I like this action, I'm pretty sure we have something from another camera here, we shot another camera for the same action, just find this section on the camera and just bring it to me here. And in a normal timeline. If you worked with multicam before, you know how complex it can get. And this thing where Blackmagic Design, okay, frankly, I love Resolve. I'm not gonna lie, like I really, really love Resolve. You have to give credit where credit is due. Like Blackmagic Design is rethinking a lot of things in the industry that were stagnant for a very long time. And this new method will suit a lot of starting filmmakers who don't want to deal with multicam sequences. Why do I need to deal with a whole multicam sequence and take like 20,000 decisions per sequence just to create a multicam? I can just sync all the files inside one bin and just whenever I need Resolve to add a file, I'll just go tell Resolve, please bring this file and add it here. That's much easier. So yeah, that was a sync bin. I'm very excited for it. I did not discuss any of the other new features in Resolve 16.1 because I think by far this is the most impressive feature that was added. And it's very easy to misunderstand. A lot of people, they get that you can click this button, it does this, it does that, but what does it serve? What function does it serve in your workflow? It basically saves you from creating multicam sequences and working with multicam sequences when you don't really need to. You have one timeline that just functions like a normal timeline. I said this many times, I'm sorry, I'm just excited. So that was all. If you like this, please visit us at filmsimplified.com, where you can join one of our free Resolve crash courses. We have a crash course, actually we have one crash course. Anyway, where you can join our free crash course on Resolve that covers all the basics of all the tabs in Resolve. Thank you.
Filmsimplified.com.